What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another New York Giants video here on Big Blue Avenue. I am Tom Scavetta with a very special guest with me here today, Kyle Russo. Kyle, how's it going, my friend?
It's going well, Tom. How you doing?
Doing good. For those of you who don't know, Kyle is a co-host with me on Review and Preview Sports. Make sure to go check us out every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. now, where we are live bashing heads about all sorts of fun sports. Kyle and I like to go head to head on a lot of topics, which is always a lot of fun. But we're here to talk about the Brian Daboll press conference reaction. So, Kyle, obviously, Daboll had his opening press conference today as the head coach of the New York Giants. Um, Very funny guy, seemed very genuine. He drove down to the Meadowlands during this weekend's snowstorm from Buffalo, so I give him a lot of credit for that. And it was nice. John Mara let Joe Shane introduce him, which was nice. And uh, what was your biggest takeaway from this press conference overall? I thought it was a pretty good press conference.
I thought it was a very good one too. Like I told you, I texted you as soon as I finished watching it earlier today, and I said he just feels like a head coach to me with everything that he said, and something that he pressed in his conference that I loved personally was that he's authentic. What you see is what you get, and I think that's all that you could want because he even kind of prompted, you know, I'm not saying pointing fingers, but saying, you know, I'm not going to be the Nick Saban. I'm not going to be Bill Belichick. I'm going to be Brian Daboll. That's who I'm going to be. That's not my personality. He said I like to have relationships, friendships. Not that Belichick and Saban don't, but what you see is what you get, and the authenticity that he preaches is something to very much look forward to as a Giants fan, considering the fact that this guy has gotten along very well with people. You saw that he already, not made some friends, but met some of the people. Daniel Jones, one of the players that he met today, which was, very nice, especially when that's probably one of the bigger concerns on the offense. And this is an offensive-minded guy. And at the same time, I forget the quote that he kept on saying as well. It was a really great quote. I think it said that players don't care how much you know. They want you to know how much you care, something like that, something along those lines, which I thought that was just an incredible quote and something that I hope that he truly lives out to be in his head coaching year.
Yeah, showing players that he cares, I think, is very important. The biggest takeaway from me is the genuine guy that he was, right? You
Yeah.
could tell he didn't script up his opening statement, right? It
No.
wasn't rehearsed or anything. It was a very, very good offbeat type of press conference. I liked it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, One of my biggest takeaways from this, deciding on who the play caller will be. I believe that was Dan Duggan's first question. He tried throwing a two-part
Yeah.
question at them, and Dable was funny. He was throwing shots at the media left and right. Matt Lombardo for showing up late. That was a lot of fun. But the play caller, right? It's going to depend on who the offensive coordinator is. And right now, all signs are pointing towards Ken Dorsey. It's starting to sound like from this press conference that Dorsey will be the Giants' offensive coordinator in 2022.
Yeah, to me, it sounds like essentially because along the likes of a Dorsey potentially being brought over, the Giants have just signed Billy Johnson to be their O-line coach now, who they brought over from Buffalo. So it sounds like the Giants are just piecing together a Buffalo-infused staff, which I'm completely fine with. Right, when you see a regiment and when you see a team organization built like that, as strong as they are, I am more than happy to have those guys running the organization, in which we both share a love for, very much so. But with Ken Dorsey, again, he was a QB coach, and that's a piece of, as Greg Thompson alluded to when we had him on 2 weeks ago, distinguishing what piece of the pie that everybody's responsible in hand for Josh Allen, obviously being the QB coach is I would assume a very big piece of that pie, along with a Daboll, who the Giants have as well. But with the Dorsey, again, you're the speculation that we all have, at least in my personal opinion, is at least with the coaching staff in which we assume to be, right? You look at the Rams, for instance, right? Kevin McConnell, I believe that's his name, is getting, as the Rams offensive coordinator, is getting head coaching jobs. But I think a lot of people would agree that Sean McVay is the one essentially calling the plays, right? Same thing with the 49ers is that Mike McDaniel is getting a lot of head coaching calls, but I think we all know that Kyle Shanahan is the one running the offense. I think that's kind of the question that, at least as a Giants fan, that I would have is that, yes, he was a QB coach. Can he run a whole offense? That's a whole different question. But I think that we would all assume, at least my assumption is that Brian Daboll is the one that's going to be calling the plays. I know he hasn't, necessarily attested to that, but I would say that would be the case.
Right. And he didn't give full blatant answers to the media, which is good, right? He didn't give much away. Focused on hiring a coaching staff. A lot of people brought up the Cincinnati Bengals reference. They went from 2 wins to 4 wins to going to the Super Bowl this year. Yeah. And they asked Daboll, like, what do you think about that? And Daboll responded, you have to learn how to crawl before you walk. I mean, the guy doesn't even have a coaching staff yet. So that's what he's focused on right now. And he did mention that the Giants are starting from scratch here. So I don't really think there's too much expectation going into 2022. I just think you want to see a good young core group of players look better. We want to see Daniel Jones play better. We want to see Saquon Barkley play better. We want to see this whole team play better. And I think that's a big thing too. And establishing continuity on that offensive line. You did mention Bobby Johnson coming over. He was on the Bills coaching staff for the past 3 seasons as their O-line coach. So now you're talking about not just Dorsey, but Johnson as well. That's 3 offensive guys coming from, what is it, the number 2 offense this past season?
They were the number 1. I think they were the number 1.
Were they number 1?
I think so. I know they were number 1 in defense. I'm pretty sure they were number 1 in points per game too as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
And there were rumors they might keep Jerry Shaplinski around, who was on Joe Judge's staff. The quarterback's coach, Shaplinski, did work with Daboll in New England for 4 years, so that would make sense. Mm-hmm. And then I believe Daboll went out for dinner Saturday night with defensive backs coach Jerome Henderson. I think he's likely to remain. And, of course, the elephant in the room, Patrick Graham. It was stated that, barring a head coaching job, Patrick Graham will be the defensive coordinator for the Giants in 2022, which I personally love to hear. A lot of people say, well, he had a bend but not break defense. He also had Jabril Peppers and Blake Martinez sidelined for most of the season, and they did lose Dalvin Tomlinson in free agency. None of those 3 events were necessarily Patrick Graham's fault.
No. And I said it all season long, whereas if you watch the Giants games as religiously as we did, right? Every weekend we were watching the game. You would see that it was the same storyline every week, is that the defense, yes, they might have been giving up 30 points, but that was because the offense couldn't stay out on the field for more than 2 drives at a time, 2 first downs at a time.
3 to 5 plays.
So exactly. So when you do that, your defense gets gassed in the first half and they just, come out flat in the second. And then that's when the points start getting put up on the board by the opposing team. So while I do think that more talent needs to be added to that defense, I think the underlying issue, another elephant in the room, is that the Giants obviously, I would say, need another pass rusher, maybe another interior defensive lineman to really solidify this defensive line at least. Because I think the secondary is fine as long as, they don't cut anybody major in the secondary, in the linebacking core, which, again, could very well happen because, as we talked about earlier prior to the start of this recording, is that Peter King of NBC Sports talked to Joe Schoen, and Joe Schoen was open and honest, saying that he needs to make around $40 million in cap space available, which if the Giants are what, Tom, you said -10 in the cap right
around
now?
That, yeah.
They got to make up, they have to cut $50 million worth of players or restructure $50 million worth of contracts.
Extensions, yeah.
Or extension, which is a lot. It's a lot, especially to be done within the next 2 months or so, because the Giants have a 5th and a 7th overall pick, which that alone will be probably around $15 million just in those 2 players. So they have a lot of work to do. I'm very happy that Graham is back, though. I think that was kind of, for me at least, that was kind of a dream scenario. I never thought that Graham was the problem.
No.
The Giants got the offensive guru that I think a lot of fans wanted. They got the GM that a lot of people wanted as well. So all the puzzle pieces are kind of fitting into the board right now, and I think that a lot of people are happy. And for the most part, again, because Tom, you've been watching football longer than I have, only by a few years, but longer than I have. But I think that as far as I'm concerned, at least in my lifetime, this is probably, in terms of front office coaching staff, this is probably the happiest or most hopeful Giants fans that we've seen in a while, I would say so. I don't think anybody was so, ecstatic about the hiring of Pat Shurmur or the moving up of Ben McAdoo, or, I know you love Joe Judge, but in comparison to this, was it, as exciting? You know what I mean, right? As
Yeah, of
exciting for
course.
you, or
Because nobody knew who Joe Judge was
exactly,
really
yeah,
before the hiring.
yeah.
I am gonna miss Shake and Bake though. I'm gonna miss that little nickname, Shake and Bake, with Joe and Pat. So one thing we have to mention now is quarterback Daniel Jones. When Daboll arrived Saturday in the middle of this nor'easter here in the Northeast, Daniel Jones was one of the few players in the facility, and Daboll said he wants Jones to point out concepts and plays he's liked during his first 3 years in the league and his time at Duke. He mentioned there's a lot to like about Daniel Jones, and I know you're a huge Daniel Jones fan, Kyle. What do you make of that statement from Coach Daboll?
I have nothing against it. The fact that this guy is asking him, hey, you've obviously seen more tape on what you do on the field versus what I have. 2 days as the head coach of the New York Giants. Tell me what you do well. Tell me what you feel comfortable with. Because he even admitted the fact that some head coaches come in, and not that they don't necessarily look to help their quarterback succeed, but they look to surround them with players that are just really good players, not really the ones, or not really calling up the plays that are best for the quarterback. Which is, I think that, not to be honest, because again, we saw two very bad offenses back-to-back years. I don't know if these offenses necessarily suited Daniel Jones. Then again, in his 3 years with the Giants, and I don't know about you, I haven't watched much Duke football, or at least tape from Daniel Jones' time. I don't really know necessarily what he does so tremendously well that you would be informing Brian Daboll upon, hey, this is what I do well. This is how we're going to get through, 60 minutes of a football game. That's just me personally. I don't know what content is there in magnitude to the point where they're not going to have to develop him, or a big part of this is going to be them developing him. That's going to be I would say, a minuscule part upon what he can do and feels comfortable with. I think more so is going to come in the fact of what they actually do, combined with surrounding him with weapons, giving him a little bit better protection, and just trying to find out what he does well in year 4.
Right. I think the stuff he does when he's under duress, like stuff he does well, is very limited. But when you give him an offensive line in front of him, he has great deep ball accuracy. He can deliver a deep pass. And I think one thing they went away from after Shermer left in 2019 was running play action plays. I think Daniel Jones was pretty good off the play action, and they kind of took that away because that was more of an Eli Manning thing. Once he retired, you didn't see much of that. Kevin Abrams will be expected to remain with the team. He's viewed as a tremendous resource, according to Joe Shane. And Abrams mentioned, according to him, that he is willing to give up the title if Shane brings on another personnel executive. So obviously, Abrams is a big cap specialist, according to a lot of Giants reporters and whatnot. What do you make of this Kevin Abrams situation?
It's kind of it's hard to tell, right? Because we're not in the office with them having these discussions, and
Yeah.
we all heard the one of the biggest reports to come out of the Joe Shane hiring, I think like a day before, is that they were going to give him what's the phrase called, carte blanche, or whatever that means, basically full control of the organization.
Yeah.
So it's obviously a very realistic possibility. If that is so the case, I would just, for me, it'd be very difficult to see him be removed from that position, only because of what we've heard about his, cap salary skills. On top of the fact he's just been a part of this organization for so long. I don't necessarily mean that. I don't necessarily know if that means that he's going to be completely removed from the organization or just at that position. But at the same time, here we were, as Giants fans, and I don't just speak for myself, and Tom, I'm not going to speak for you, but from what I hear from all Giants fans is, just a month ago, people were fearing the fact of Kevin Abrams being the next general manager. So I don't necessarily know what this means, or what this necessarily entails, because again, we're not in these meetings. We might say that Kevin Abrams, okay, no problem, take the step down, but who is Joe Shane going to replace him with, right? It's like you alluded to in your earlier speeches. The Giants don't even have a coaching staff yet. We're worried about what's happening in the front office parts that nobody even sees, nobody even knows about necessarily until you deeply dive into it. So what does it translate on the field? What does that mean? I think that's the biggest concern. But we don't know what that means at all, at least in my personal opinion. I don't know what that means.
Right.
What that means for him being demoted? What does that mean for somebody else being brought in? Is that person going to do a better job? We don't know that. I don't know.
Yeah, it's all left to be seen, right? Shane and Daboll, they're unknowns at this time. We know their success in Buffalo, but will that success translate into New York? That's the biggest thing. Well, technically, they're already working in New York, but you get the point. I think one of the reporters today was like, "Welcome to New York, coach." And if I'm Daboll, I'm like,
I remember that.
I was thinking the exact same thing. I'm like, oh boy. But it was confirmed. John Mara did sign Brian Daboll to a 5-year deal with the Giants. That was the same deal that was offered to Pat Shurmur and Joe Judge. So now the Giants are paying 3 different coaches next season. I think Shurmur is off the books after this year. They're still going to have to pay Joe Judge for 2 more seasons after this upcoming year. So 3 years left to pay Joe Judge, and now you're paying Brian Daboll. So hopefully Daboll is here for longer than 2 years and finally breaks that spell. They say things happen in threes. We got it with McAdoo, Shurmur, and Judge. Hopefully Daboll is better than all 3 and could be that head coach that a lot of Giants fans want. They want him to succeed, and I think he's very likable by the media already. I mean, he was funny. He was cracking jokes with them, right? He was trying to lighten the mood a little bit because people don't know this guy.
Yeah.
So I thought I was very impressed with the way he interacted because he walks in the room, he's not like a dominating presence, right? And I don't know. I just thought it was funny. He pointed out his 4-year-old fell asleep during the press conference.
I think that's something to take away from as well. What we took away from this press conference is just the fact that I think that when we see football minds, we get so caught up in what their verbiage is football wise. We also like to see the human aspect to it. And I think that's what we saw out of Brian Daboll today. Is just, everything that he spoke. Was there some words, football terms, of course, football knowledge, of course. But for the most part, a lot of things were just being human, right? Like he didn't deny the fact that there was going to need to be some retooling. He said he wasn't going to make any promises. Why? Because he understands that there's a lot of stuff to do. There's a lot of work yet to be done. I think at even one point, probably about 15 minutes, 20 minutes into his press conference, he was like, I can't wait till this is over so I could go back, make some phone calls, and hire out the rest of my coaching staff. Because that's just the determination that he has, knowing the situation that he's in right now. On top of the fact, I don't know if you picked up on it as well, just the friendliness behind him as well. Pretty much every reporter that asked him a question, before the reporter could even finish what they were saying, he would say, "How you doing?" You know what I mean? Just the little things, to me at least. That's what matters, is that human aspect along with the football knowledge. Obviously, that's a major contribution and the bigger percentage of meaning, but also just being human. You don't have to be, this tough guy, rough guy, tremendous football mind, only talking football. You're talking to other people here.
Right. I like that as well. I thought he was very clever in the way he delivered some one-liners out there about the bald beard club. Hey, you got a seat next to me back there. I thought that was funny.
Yeah.
And his 22-year-old son, currently a GA at Penn State. So that's a little fun fact. Football guy, Brian Daboll. Definitely am excited to see what he has in store. Kyle, is there anything you wanted to add here on Coach Daboll? I think there's really not much more we can really dissect right now because, I mean, he doesn't even have a coaching staff yet. So overall, I'm impressed so far, cautiously optimistic. I'm not falling in love with the guy yet, but I like him. I really like him so far. I think he's a guy that is going to do his best. You mentioned he made no promises, and it might take a while to turn this team around, but you know what? Got to be patient sometimes, and if it means long-term success and 2 or 3 years from now, hell, I'll take it, because the NFC East, again, it looks like it's going to be in dysfunction again next season.
Yeah. Overall, not much to say. Again, I think that human aspect, along with just being authentic and honest, not promising anything. I think that's really what's huge, is that everybody wants to hear, I'm going to turn this team into a playoff team in the next 2-3 years. We're going to be contenders in the next 3 years. He didn't say any of that. He was just being open and honest, because bottom line is, no matter how much we want to try to, be optimistic about this team, do we know what's going to take the field in 2022 for the 2022 season? What we're going to see? No. And they don't either, which I like the authenticity about. I'd rather be told the truth straight up than lied to and say, well, You just said that we're going to be contenders. How are we going to be contenders when you just finished off the season 4-13? That doesn't look like a team that's turning around. This doesn't look like a Cincinnati Bengals team in the next 2 years or so. But I love the authenticity. I love the honesty. I love the fact that he's a football mind and he's going straight to work, right? You know, even Shane, I complimented the fact that after 4 hours of being hired, Brian Daboll was the first interview that he had. Now you see Daboll, you know, hiring all these Bills former staff members. You know, you just talked about Bobby Johnson getting hired, Ken Dorsey on the way, him in the middle of the interview saying, you know, I can't wait to leave so I could hire more people. Just getting to the grind, and especially because draft is 3 months away, I think the Giants are in a really good position right now. And I think as a fan, I'm probably at this point in time, I'm probably happier than I have been about this staff and this front office than I've been in a very long time. I think I could say that.
Yeah, this is probably one of the happier moments since Tom Coughlin resigned back in
No doubt.
2015. So, but folks, Kyle, thank you so much for joining me. This has
Absolutely.
been a dandy. Looking forward to having more of these leading up to the draft, breaking down some film on some of these prospects the Giants might select at number 5 and number 7 overall. This was our Brian Daboll press conference reaction. If you want more content, make sure to go follow Big Blue Avenue on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube at Big Blue Avenue. And also remember to go follow us at Review and Preview Sports as well, where we live stream weekly. Kyle, thank you so much. And without further ado, let's go Big Blue.